Shalom, shalom.
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 Shalom makam, which is peace unto you all. Hayawam tawab la'atam, za'achikam yawam. Salat. Anachna wahai barsha, like with the Hebrew Israelites coming to you week in and week out through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, to preach you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, West Indians, Haitians, and Israelite foreigners. Nachamatam, Kaya, Hawalakat Hashemayim, Kwara, repent ye for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. First and foremost, before we get started, we're going to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rachak, Wadash, double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone that told us his truth and rule well. And much respect to you, bros, out there pushing his truth with all righteousness and sincerity. Shalom, shalom.
Shalom.
So just as the lesson is entitled, it says home improvement. All right, and the first one we went into, it was a little bit of an intro, but it went into briefly the fear of the Lord. All right, today's lesson is going to go into health and wellness. And we can start with Proverbs, the 24th chapter and the 3rd verse. I'm going to get it. This is Proverbs chapter 24 and verse 3. And it says, through wisdom is an house builded, and by understanding it is established. All right. And, line backing on Psalms 119 and 9, it says, wherewithal shall a young man cleanse his way by taking heed thereto according to thy word. And to start that verse, it goes into, it says Beth, but in Hebrew it will be Bayat, which is your house, your spirit. So it says, reading this again, Proverbs 24 and 3, it says, through wisdom is an house builded, and by understanding it is established. So ultimately, we build ourselves up in wisdom, all right, which is the exemplification of the Lord Yahweh Shai. It says, and by understanding it's established. So ultimately we are established through building ourselves up in wisdom. All right, and that word for understanding goes into the Hebrew word. I'm gonna get it, and it says tabawan, and it says intelligence, but it goes back to the root word bayan. All right, and bayan goes into, it says to discern. So in discernment, through building ourselves up in the Lord Yahweh Shai, we ultimately gain that discernment, which roots us. All right, it establishes us because we're abiding in the rock. But touching on that word for understanding, all right, we get the ability to know that thin line. I'm gonna get that word for. I'm gonna keep reading down. All right, Proverbs 24 and 4. It says, and by knowledge shall the chambers be filled with all precious and pleasant riches. All right, and one of those rooms, all right, because when you got an actual house, all right, how how it appreciates over time. You'll have a fence, all right, you might get a shed, you'll have the rooms, you might have carpet, but you'll put the hardwood flooring, all right, but then also you got the rooms, all right. So in an actual house, but in your spiritual house, you got, in one room you got the fear of the Lord, one room you got knowledge, all right, one room you got wisdom, and so on and so forth. But this particular room, all right, we're going into health and wellness because it's very imperative. So reading it again, Proverbs 24 and 4 says, and by knowledge shall the chambers be filled with all precious and pleasant riches. Now I want to get this word for chambers. And it says Chadar Yam, and it says chamber, room, parlor, innermost or inward part within, so inside that house, all right, inside of our spirit, ultimately we have to reframe our mind and rewire, how we once thought, because as pursuant to the conversation we had before we cut on the camera, ultimately we was going into, how Jake, all right, in the world don't have that understanding of this truth, first and foremost, but inside that they don't have the understanding of true health and wellness. Jake be eating Burger King, Whoppers, McDonald's, Big Macs, and so on and so forth, a whole bunch of stuff that's not conducive to us being in our optimal state.
I got one for you real quick.
Mhm.
This is 2 Timothy 3, and I'll start in 16. It reads, all scripture is given by inspiration of the Most High, and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of the Most High may be perfect, thoroughly furnished unto all good works. Right? And we're going into how, right, that home improvement, right? Each room is being thoroughly furnished, man. Right? Each aspect of the spirit, right, is being cultivated so that it's at its full strength, man.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna get Psalms 119 and verse 9. I'm gonna also get this. This is Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 15. It says, but it shall come to pass if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy power to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee, and which ultimately, that's what Jake has inherited, being that, we sinned, we went off against the Lord, all right, and Jake has inherited, the ideologies and things that come with being black, so-called black, Latino, Native American, so on and so forth. All right, and with these ways of life, Jake is in a very destitute type of a state. That's why the scriptures say this right here, Psalms 119 and verse 9, because of those ways that we learn, we got those from the heathen. All right, Psalms 119 and 9, it says, Bayat, and that goes into the house, all right, that spirit. It says, wherewithal shall a young man cleanse his way? By taking heed thereto according to thy word. So we ultimately cleanse our way, by subscribing to the true water, Yahweh Shai. We cleanse the things that we once knew, all right, and the ways that we ultimately was carrying ourselves in. All right, we get that true brainwashing, and that's ultimately for the betterment of our soul. So from that, could we get Bon Sirach 30 and verse 15 to 16?
It's the book of Sirach, chapter 30 and verse 16. There is no riches above a sound body.
Shaka, you started up one verse.
Okay. So Sirach 30 and 15.
So like it, brother. Can you start at 14, Baba Shah?
Okay. Sirach 30 and 14. It reads, better is the poor being sound and strong and of strong constitution than a rich man that is afflicted in his body.
Right. So that's like it, brother. Oh no, I just want to add this part right here. Pretty much, it says, "Better is the poor being sound and strong of constitution than the rich man that is afflicted in his body." Right, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how rich you are. You have a lot of these rich people out here, wealthy. These Edomites out here, but yet because of their poor diet or poor health, what I'm saying, they live pretty much like in a prison where they're not enjoying themselves. So as it says, better is to be poor, being sound and strong of constitution. So it's better to be poor, better to be broke. As long as you have your mind and your body, what I'm saying, you're really ultimately free, because money doesn't make a man. What I'm saying? So at the end of the day, your health has to be, paramount. It has to be, let's say, a strong body makes a strong mind. So having that strong body really is better than having all these riches that people strive for in this world. You got it, bro.
I just want to get this real quick. It's a definition for that strong constitution on the Google AI overview. It says a strong constitution refers to a person's robust physical and mental health, characterized by high energy, resilience to illness, and quick recovery. And so, pretty much like you said, right, that strength of mind and body, right, is more important than the resources, right? Because there's people who have access to all these things, but their bodies are failing them, man. Right? We see examples with was it Jacob Rothschild, where he had the 10 heart replacements and things of that nature, right? You see Jake in the world, right? They are wealthy, but their bodies are failing them or their minds are failing them, man. So it's like those things are more important than having the riches. But
I believe that man was Evelyn Rothschild that had the 10 transplants, and then you also have an example. You have, what's his name, Stephen Hawking.
Exactly.
That motherfucker threw.
Continuing on. Sirach 30 and 15. Health and good estate of body are above all gold, and a strong body above infinite wealth.
So it says health and good estate of body are above all gold, and a strong body above infinite wealth. So health, all right, in Hebrew, that word will be shalom, in which that means the body is at peace. So peace and health, all right, shalom, that's synonymous, all right, with the body that's at ease. That's why the opposite of that, or antonym to that, would be a dis-ease. A body at dis-ease is a disease. So it says health and good estate of body are above all gold. And gold appreciates over time. And what we put into our body, All right, it allows for us to, to appreciate over time. Well, it should, But reading it again, it says, health and good estate of body are above all gold, and a strong body above infinite wealth. So it's better. It's ultimately better, to have, be in a good estate of mind. Have a good spirit, and be healthy. Because we had examples of the dude. What was his name in the wheelchair? Stephen Hawkins. He had all that money, those riches. But he couldn't even do nothing with it. So it's ultimately better to have your wits with you, and to be able to still be ambulatory. And ambulatory goes into the ability to walk, and things of that nature. So it's ultimately good, to be in that estate.
And if I may add to your point too, you even have a lot of people, that's trying to tap into the whole, the brain hip, right? The BCI, trying to be able to having that implant in their brain so they can walk again, right? And they're spending, absorbent amount of, of money just so they can be able to walk again, so they can be able to, what I'm saying, move around and pretty much have that same function as everybody else,
Mhm.
And so that shows you, money isn't everything. What I'm saying? These people are spending all this money in order to be just like you, what I'm saying, be in a sound body, in a sound mind. So it shows you where the true riches lie.
Exactly. Continuing on. Sirach 30:16. There is no riches above a sound body, and no joy above the joy of the heart.
It says there is no riches above a sound body, and no joy above the joy of the heart. And what ultimately, gives us that those riches, all right, and that joy is this truth. So it's nothing that amounts to this truth. This truth appreciates over time, all right, and ultimately us abiding in this truth is going to keep us at a good state of body and mind.
Okay.
So from that, can you skip down to verse 25?
Okay. Sirach or Ecclesiasticus 30:25. A cheerful and good heart will have a care of his meat and diet.
So reading this again, it says a cheerful and good heart will have, a cheerful and good heart will have a care of his meat and diet. So if you liken the body unto a car, which the two pretty much is synonymous. All right, if you have a car with full synthetic oil or whatever type of oil, full synthetic ultimately is better. But you say you keep that old oil in there, and you just keep using it over and over and over. Well, eventually it's gonna start to spill out and have negative effects to the engine. So if we putting you know uh, garbage into our body, McDonald's, sweets, and just having an overindulgence of the things that are bad, for the body. All right, well, the body isn't going to respond, how you want it to. All right, and then also, our minds, because what we put into our bodies, all right, that's ultimately fuel, because how the body is made up. You got nerves, all right, your nerves are likened unto like electrodes, so they ultimately send impulses to the brain. All right, and those impulses can be good impulses, or bad, so we want to have, good impulses, to where we're making righteous decisions, because you are what you eat. Go back to that saying, you are what you eat. So we have to put, the healthy foods, and that consists of fruits, vegetables, you know being cognizant how much meat intake, especially in this world, because the meat ain't how it used to be. Intaking water, we got to make sure we're intaking water. But then it says a cheerful and good heart. Your heart goes back to your mind, lab. And it says good heart. All right, that word for heart in Hebrew is lab. La is a staff, so a staff represents authority. Ba is a house or something that's within. So the authority within. So it says a cheerful and good heart. The authority within. It says will have a good care of his meat and diet. Your diet don't just consist of what you eat. It goes into what you watching on TV, what you're reading, who you're around. Because what you read is gonna be um what you read, those words are going to be stuck with you. That's why the scriptures say, it says, study to show thyself approved, to the Most High, a workman that needed not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth, because it's this word that ultimately needs to be on our mind. That goes into our diet as well. So that's the first thing that we should be eating. All right, and also, in the time that we have to ourselves, it should be something conducive, to the spirit. But it says, Maria again, a cheerful and good heart will have a care of his meat and diet, so that the people that we're around, want to make sure that we're around brothers, all right, and minimally around those of this world, because those of this world, they got a altered way of thinking, and spirits, pretty much spirits can be impressionable,
Right.
so that, and then also, what we watch, it should be uh something, again, conducive to the spirit.
Right, because just to answer your point, you talked about like how uh, being around people, pretty much the stuff, their mindset is pretty much contagious. Just like you mentioned, consuming, what you consume, not just physically, but even mentally, like what you take in, it can pollute your temple. It can just as when you eat, like what's been going around with the whole salmon thing, right? If you eat some salmon from like a farmed area, like a farmed salmon meat, pretty much it has a lot of tapeworms and a lot of worms in it. So you ingest that, and now you're polluted. Now you got those in you. It's the same thing, if you, you know, take in, whatever forms or ways of philosophies of friends around you or family members that are around you. You know what I'm saying? That all that is like you've mentioned is impressionable, right? But may I get something for you real quick?
Hmm.
This is 1 Corinthians 3:16. It says, "Know ye not that ye are the temple of the Most High, and that the Spirit of the Most High dwelleth in you?" Right. So we're the temple, right? You're talking about a house being builded, right? So our temple, is part of that, the part of that house, right? But it says, "If any man defile the temple of the Most High, him shall the Most High destroy. For the temple of the Most High is holy, which temple ye are." Right. So if you're eating bad foods, also ultimately the Most High would plague you with, the way He'll destroy you is by plaguing you with diabetes, plaguing you with, you know, different types of cancers, different types of worms, different types of, you know, various diseases. Right. Uh, um, then even if you deal with like the mental part, you're taking in a bunch of different ideologies or taking on different types of uh, uh, philosophies, right? The most I can give you the plague of the mind, you know, and now you're definitely bugged out. Now you're definitely through bugged out and in your body and your mind. You see, so it's better to keep, have that spiritual detox to where you're detoxing your body, but also you're detoxing your mind of all the filthiness of the earth, right? Of the ways of the world. And the brother quoted, Psalms 119, right? The way you cleanse yourself is by taking heed to this word, by the washing of this word. What you got it, bro?
You had some, Cornwall?
I got one for you real quick.
Okay.
It's Sirach 27:12. It reads, "If thou be among the indiscreet, observe the time, but be continually among men of understanding." Right? And as brothers are going into, that applies both with the people that you're around, right, and the things that you consume, man. Right? If you consuming things, right, that lack discretion, right, things that are more catered to the flesh, right, you got to observe that time, right. You have to be cognizant of how you're using these these last days, man, right, because you can quickly fall into these pits of what's the word, pretty much wasting the time away, man, you know.
Mm.
But it says, "Be thou continually among men of understanding," because you can. This is the true nourishment, man. Right? Both nourishing your body and nourishing your spirit. Right? So you should be continually seeking out that nourishment, right? While the time is still, man.
Right.
Could we get you about to say something, Yeshaya?
No, I was just going to add to the point, how the scriptures say, men should not live by bread alone, right, but by taking heed thereto according to thy word. So, it's not just about, what you take in, as far as physically, even though that's also important. But the main thing is the truth. You know what I'm saying? Subscribing to the truth, because that's ultimately what's going to deliver your soul, in these last days. But you got it, bro.
Could you get Deuteronomy 8, and you start verse 1, go down to verse 3. I'm gonna get Deuteronomy 4 and 4.
Deuteronomy 8. Should start at verse 4.
Verse 1, and then go down to 3.
Verse 1. Okay, con. This is Deuteronomy 8 and verse 1. It says, all the commandments which I command thee this day shall ye observe to do, that ye may live and multiply.
Right. So when we look at, what's in the law, statutes, and commandments, it's all for our betterment. Like, when, 2/3 of Jake, I had brought this point up at camp the other day, but 2/3 of Jake, they get the, Jake could get a shelf from Walmart or this is the day of demonstrative, and they get a shelf from Walmart. They're like, oh, fuck it, I don't need the instructions. They toss them to the side, throw that shit together, and shit just fall apart. Like, so when you liken it unto us, scriptures say that we was made to fear the Lord. If we paraphrase in Ecclesiastes 12 and 13, so we got this manual. All right, the manual is a scripture. So reading it again, it says, all commandments, Deuteronomy 8 and 1, all the commandments which I command thee this day shall ye observe to do. And that word observe is shamar. All right, it means to ultimately, it goes back to shamar, which means to guard, to observe, to preserve life. So this is the preservation of life. So it says, shall ye observe to do, that ye may live and multiply, to thrive, and go in and possess the land which the Lord swear unto your fathers. And also it says, and go in and possess the land, because if we, the times that we went off, we ultimately was pushed out the land, so this was twofold, ultimately to keep us thriving and to keep us in that land, and what's known as, the Fertile Crescent. But you keep going.
And if I may add to your points real quick too, it's these were commandments, right? So these were like it's like you're living in your father's house, you know what I'm saying? So you gotta abide by these rules. And if you don't abide by these rules, you're gonna get kicked out, right? And it got to the point where, Jake was just going off, right? When it says in Proverbs 14 and 12, right? How does it go? There's a way that seems right into a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. Right. So Jake felt like you mentioned, how Jake would throw away the manual on how to build this thing and try to build themselves, but then it just falls apart. And that's essentially what Jake was doing. Jake was like, you know what, I don't need the manuscript. I got it. But what happened? We ended up getting kicked out. We ended up suffering the curses. Nothing but bad shit happened whenever we decided to do things our way, right? But this manuscript, as you mentioned, is the guidelines for us to be able to thrive, right? And that's ultimately, what the Lord wants for us. He wants for us to be able to thrive. But, Jake being hard headed, we got what we got. But going back, Deuteronomy 8 and 1, the latter part, it says, and go and possess the land which the Lord sware unto your fathers, and thou shalt remember all the way which the Lord thy power led thee these 40 years in the wilderness, to humble thee and to prove thee, to know what was in thine heart, whether thou wouldest keep his commandments or no. It says, verse 3, and he humbled thee and suffered thee to hunger and fed thee with manna, which thou knewest not, neither did thy fathers know, that he might make thee know that man doth not live by bread only, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of the Lord doth man live.
Right, we're ultimately able to live, and thrive, by subscribing to this truth. By reading back this latter part, it says that he might make thee know that man doeth not live by bread only, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of the Lord doeth man live. And ultimately you got 2/3 of Jake, they in that mindset of, they ultimately don't have faith. They ultimately don't believe, on the scriptures. So what that does to their mind is they have an overindulging type of mindset. So they don't just overly indulge in actual eating; they're overly indulging in other facets of life. When we have been instructed, that ultimately we're supposed to live and thrive off the scriptures.
Right.
So I'm also get this. This is Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse 4. It says, but ye that did cleave unto the Lord your power are alive, every one of you this day. Behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as the Lord my power commanded me, that ye should do so in the land whither ye go to possess it. It says, keep therefore and do them. And which keep, again, it goes back to preserve a life. It's commandments. It's what we're supposed to do, but it's a reason behind why we're supposed to do it. That's why it says, keep, like this is what's going to preserve your life, and it goes into the fear of the Lord, and it makes sense. So it says, keep therefore and do them. it says, "For this is your wisdom and your understanding." So that's ultimately the understanding. That's that thin line, that I mentioned in the spirit, that that you don't want to cross. That uh, 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 the ability to be able to discern between what's good and what's bad. It gives us the understanding by fearing the Lord. That's why I said the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom. But it says, "Keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations, which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people." So we did a lesson one time. I believe it was last week, me and Yeshaya, but going into the IQ. So this is the true IQ, the IQ test. Esau got his IQ test, but really the fear of the Lord is the right IQ test.
Right. It's a sign of true intelligence, man.
Mm-hmm.
From
that, bros had anything?
I had something.
Okay.
Let me get it real quick. This is Proverbs 11 and verse 1. It says, "A false balance is abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight." So, as the brother mentioned, essentially what Jake needs is a right balance to everything. The scriptures talk about, use the world, but not abuse it. You know what I'm saying? So, the world is out there for us to use. We got to use the materials, do what we got to do. But Jake takes it a step further and starts tapping into the left-hand side of things. There's a right way to use things. The scriptures talk about how all things are lawful, but not all things are expedient, right? So pretty much, uh, um, you got to pretty much operate within the balance, in that right balance, to where, what I'm saying, you're actually profiting and you're actually benefiting yourself, spiritually, but also physically. What I'm saying? Jake Wood, like you mentioned, McDonald's, or mention all these things. Yeah, these things are out here, and we really try to refrain from eating these things, right? And especially McDonald's. I mean, if you're eating McDonald's, you're just through. But like some of this stuff, some of these fast food shit, like, we gotta refrain from that stuff. We understand, like, sometimes we don't have the time to cook or whatever, especially with this work schedule and the way Esau has things set up. But really, you gotta start, like, having a more balanced meal, like, as we're going into this lesson, right? That's all part of that home improvement, part of that building your own temple up, getting it right, so that way, as we mentioned earlier, right, a strong body is a strong mind. So if you have a strong body, if your body is hot, nice and healthy, you will be able to operate at a more optimum level, right? At a more balanced level, to where you can actually handle the weight that's being thrown at you, because the scripture talk about in Ecclesiasticus 2:1, "My son, if thou come to serve the Lord, prepare thy soul for temptation." So we understand that we're getting ourselves into a battle zone, right? In the mindset of being at war. So if you're
Right.
at war and if you're not healthy, and you get all this stuff thrown at you, how you going to withstand if your body's not healthy and then your mind's not healthy?
Exactly.
Could you have some more, Yeshaya?
No, I just wanted to see if you wanted to add something.
Could you get Bonserrat? Could you get Bonserrat 31 and 20? But yeah, I want to land back on your point, because if you're eating too much, ultimately it can throw off your balance. And when you look at balance in Hebrew, it's azan, or that's the word for ear. Ma'azanyam is the word for balance or balances. And ultimately, when we talking about warfare, so when you get a soldier or a trooper or whatever, it's all about that weight distribution. So ultimately what's gonna allow for that true weight distribution, is being balanced. All right. Being disciplined and how we eat, being disciplined. All right, we got Boss Rock 27, I believe was verse 12. When thou art among the indiscreet to observe the time, roughly paraphrasing. Being balanced in all these different areas is going to keep us to where we can sustain that load, like you mentioned in Boss Rock 2 and verse 1. Because it's all about being proved. And we got Deuteronomy 8, the 8th chapter. All right, going into verse 2, it said we being proved. So along this straight gate, we got to have that proper weight distribution, because we don't want to lean too far over to the right or too far over to the left, because then we'll be out. We want to make sure that we're properly distributed. All right, and then being balanced.
Hey, that's why scriptures say, "Put a knife to thy throat, if thou be a man given to appetites." Roughly paraphrasing, man. Right, pretty much saying that if you can't control, whatever appetites that you have, if you lack that discipline, right, you might as well be perish, man. You know. But this is Sirach 31 and verse 20. It reads, "Sound sleep cometh of moderate eating. He riseth early, and his wits are with him. But the pain of watching and choler and pangs of the belly are with an unstable or unsatiable man."
So it says, sound sleep cometh of moderate eating. All right. When you look at, sound sleep, to get sound sleep, you got to enter that REM sleep, what they call REM sleep, which it goes into what they also call the circadian rhythm. And when you liken everything in creation, everything has a clock that it operates on, so one of those clocks is, how we sleep. So it says sound sleep cometh of moderate eating, so being disciplined in eating. All right, that's how we ultimately enter that REM sleep, so that we can wake up refreshed for the next day, because it shouldn't be to where, we wake up, you just feeling groggy and shit like that. So it says he riseth early and his wits are with him. You wake up, you feel refreshed and you good. It says, but the pain of watching and choler and pangs of the belly are with an unsatiable man. So unsatiable goes back into, you can't be satiated, you can't be satisfied, so continually eating. And I got some information right here. It says it says, excuse me, it says give me a second. All right, so like, Rose had any precepts?
Let's see, I have one real quick.
Okay, you good.
Let me get this real quick. It's First Timothy. First Timothy 4:8. Because again, we're talking about the body. It says, for bodily exercise, this is First Timothy 4:8. For bodily exercise profiteth little, but godliness is profitable unto all things. So, again, we're talking about the body. We're talking about, the health. Health is wealth, right? So, exercise, as it says, bodily exercise profiteth little. So it does profit. Even though, the spiritual. It says but it says, but godliness is profitable unto all things. So, ultimately, that your spiritual physique has to matter most. That's paramount. But of course your exercise again helps. It helps. When you sweat, you're purging out a lot of the badness that's in your body. Purging out all the pretty much sweat. Your sweat pretty much leaks out all the impurities that you have inside your body. But it also says also, like, you want to say something, Mark?
No, I was just saying the toxins and all that.
Right, the toxins and all that, right? But also says, having promise of the life that now is and of that which is to come, right? Because ultimately through um, us tapping into the spirit and, tapping into the truth, that's ultimately where you're going to receive, a more greater reward. But again, the body is not to be ignored, right? This is a temple, as we mentioned earlier, so we got to take care of it. If we can't even take care of our temple or take care of our body, how much more, the temple of the Lord, how much more, the body, right? The spiritual body, what I'm saying? So uh everything has its purposes, and the Most High gave us this, so we got to take care of it.
Mm-hmm. How you treat your body, what routines you put yourself on, that's ultimately an exemplification first and foremost of the Lord, and then also exemplification of how you walk your conversation. That's why our scriptures say a man may be known by his look and his countenance when thou meetest him. A man, excessive laughter, his attire and gait show what he is. How you walk. How you carry yourself. But I got that real fast. Did a brother have the benefits for working out?
Yeah, I got it.
Kai, you go ahead and get that.
Khan. So this is from the AI overview. It says, physical activity offers profound spiritual benefits by acting as a form of active meditation, fostering gratitude, and deepening the mind-body connection. It says regular movement, such as walking or yoga, calms the mind, reduces stress, and provides a space for reflection or worship, strengthening overall mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being.
Mm-hmm. Con.
It has
So
more, but it's a lot.
Kai, it's all good. So I mean, it has. That's not the end all be all, but it has the benefit. You know, that's part of it. You know, it's a small sliver of, it's a small sliver of this truth. You know, it's not. You know, we working out, and that's just what it is. Like nah, like it has small benefits. You know, so that's a part of the maintenance with these bodies. So I got that information. I'm gonna read this again. Bonsarot 31:20. It says, "Sound sleep cometh of moderate eating. He riseth early, and his wits are with him. But the pain of watching and choler and pains of the belly are with an unsatiable man. And unsatiable goes back to somebody that's eating too much. So right here, AI overview, it says eating too much, especially near bedtime, severely disrupts sleep by forcing your body to digest instead of resting, leading to fragmented, shallow sleep and lower overall sleep quality. Common consequences include insomnia, acid reflux, heartburn, increased body temperature, and uncomfortable fullness, often leading to a cycle of fatigue." And skipping down, it says, I read this. It says reduced sleep quality. It says digestion slows during sleep. A full stomach keeps your body active, interfering with the natural circadian rhythm and preventing deep restorative sleep. Acid reflux and heartburn. Lying flat after a large meal allows stomach acid to rise, causing pain that interrupts sleep. It says waking up frequently. High calorie, fatty, or sugary foods can cause blood sugar spikes and crashes, forcing you to wake up in the middle of the night. That's those pains, mentioned in that scripture. It says delayed sleep onset. Eating a heavy meal less than an hour before bed can make it hard to fall asleep initially. And it says food coma aftermath. While you may feel sleepy initially, post print, or however you say that word, the subsequent digestion process often leads to poor quality and interrupted rest. So being insatiable, and eating can cause all of those things, and I'm pretty sure it has more consequences and symptoms, But it's best to be disciplined and to have a good routine, and how we eat, how we work out, and then also stretching. Did bros have anything else to add?
I was just going to add that word choler.
Mm-hmm.
It says refers to intense anger or irritability. So just going back to that verse, right? That lack of sleep or that disruption in your sleep, right, is going to lead to your mood being in detriment, man.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's a lot. The acid reflux and the heartburn that goes into the pains, um, mentioned in Bonsrot 31 and 20. You know. But from that, I believe. Oh, could we get Bonsrot 37 and 30?
Let me get it. This is Bonsarok 37 and verse 30, and it says, For excess of meats bringeth sickness, and surfeiting will turn into choler.
So eating too much foods, that's gonna bring a state to where you feeling sick, and these bodies it wasn't created to overindulge. That's what's wrong with America, Babylon the Great. Everybody's fat, and nobody is ultimately focused on their well being. All right, and that's why the scripture say, arise ye and depart, for this is not your rest. You know, but it says, I'm gonna read it again. For excess of meats bringeth sickness, and surfeiting turn into choler. Let me get that word for choler. And it says choler is an archaic term for anger, irascibility, or quick temper, irritable disposition. It says historically it referred to yellow bile, one of the four bodily humors believed to cause anger, anxiety, and rage when in excess. So ultimately, eating too much, that can cause it to where you always in a very angry type of a state. It really go back to the parasites.
Hmm. Yeah, I got this definition as well. I wanted to add to that. For surfeiting, It says that surfeiting is an act of overindulging, particularly in food or drink, leading to physical oppression, nausea, or sickness. Right. So, as it read right there, right, excess of meats bringeth sickness, and surfeiting into choler or choler. Right. So, as it says in verse 31, by surfeiting have many perished, but he that taketh heed prolongeth his life. You see, so excess of anything, can lead to sickness, can lead to choler, can lead to all various type of diseases, right? So that's why we mentioned earlier, that balance is needed. A false balance is an abomination unto the Lord, and that's why people start receiving these sicknesses, right? Different cancers, like I mentioned, diabetes, all these different types of diseases are put there because, ultimately, to bring judgment unto those who are operating in a life of imbalance.
Right.
And more specifically, eating too much can indirectly, turn into sophriating and choler. But I got this information right here. It says eating too much does not directly cause parasites, because it's indirect. It says, but it can be a symptom of having them, So if you're eating too much, all right, obviously it has to be some sort of problem, because that's what's causing that choler, that irritability, that anger, that anxiety, And would you say surfactant was Yeshaya?
Surfeiting is just being pretty much overindulging or having over excess of stuff.
Right, and eating in excess can be a symptom of actually having the parasites. That's why that's when we will use that precept. I believe it was Bon Sirach 30 and verse 25. Having a good care of the meat and diet. Eating it in discipline. Not overindulging.
Right.
But I got this information too. Did bros have something else?
I was going to add to that point,
Mm-hmm.
because all those things, they have the compound effects, man. Right. So,
Mic cut out, bro.
can you hear me, Yeshai?
Yeah, you good?
Yeah, con,
You hear me now?
con.
You hear me, Yawan?
Con.
Okay, kind of slow. But I was just saying, those things, it creates a cycle, So you fall into that pit society is built upon, is that they put, you may overeat, and then you get dogs and things of that nature, and it creates that anxiety and depression, which leads you to falling further and further and further into these holes, man. So that's why it's important to be mindful of these things, because it's easy to slip into it, man.
Mm-hmm.
Right. One thing that comes to mind is that scripture. How's it go? Purge out the old leaven.
Mm-hmm.
Let me get that real quick. 1 Corinthians 5 and verse 7. It says, "Purge out therefore the old." As a matter of fact, sorry, 6. Your glorying is not good. Know ye not that little leaven leaveneth the whole lump? Purge out therefore the old leaven, that ye may be a new lump, as ye are unleavened. For Hamashiach, our Passover, is sacrificed for us. Now, of course, this is talking about, spiritually, mentally, to purge out the old man, but even when you talk about it physically, you have some people who, are filled with leaven. It starts off with like a yeast infection, and then it becomes what they call it, candida, and it gets worse and worse and worse. And really, it's an easy fix to do that. All you gotta do is stop with the sugars, fix your diet. You know what I'm saying? That's how you purge out that leaven physically out of your body, but the point being is that, you know, that balance is required. You got if once you get in the point where you're out of balance, you're gonna have to make a drastic change, you know, to try to correct yourself and try to put yourself in that proper balance again. Right. So like you mentioned, overindulgence, it continues to add and add and add and build up and build up. Well, that's how a yeast infection is, or candida becomes, to the point where it eventually becomes a cancer. You start getting what they call it, colon cancer, all different types of cancers in the gut, right? But this is why we're bringing out this lesson, because um especially our people, we suffer a lot from these different types of cancers because of overindulgence and and just the way Jake's mind is, is just in the mindset of having it now, now, and fast and quick, a mindset of what do you call it? Instant gratification, you know. And we live in a society where everything is instant, and Jake wants it now and quick. So, and also in a state of what do you call it? FOMO, right? Fear of missing out, you know. Pretty much everything has to be instant. If Jake feels like, well, if I don't have a chance to eat now, even though you just ate, it might be like an hour later, you might get some free food because you fear missing out. You don't want to miss out on the free food. Jake would just eat it instead of having that discipline and be like, nah, I already ate, I'm good. But you got it, bro.
Con. We talked about the stuff that you want to intake. Part of that intake goes into it also goes into stretching. Taking care of your body.
Mm-hmm.
But I got this information right here. It says I put spiritual benefits of stretching. It says stretching offers significant spiritual benefits by fostering a deeper mind-body connection, releasing stored emotional tension. Because stretching, like a lot of times, what your body does is, with stress, a lot of times, that stress can go to, it manifests as tension, like it might be in your hips, it might be in the shoulders and the neck. All right. And what stretching does, it releases those tensions, because a lot of things, coming up, Jake, don't really stretch, so that tension stays with them, 2/3 of Jake. But continuing this, it says stretching offers significant spiritual benefits by fostering a deeper mind-body connection, releasing stored emotional tension, and cultivating present moment awareness. It acts as a grounding practice that reduces anxiety, promotes inner peace, and allows for intentional calm energy, often helping to quiet the mind and foster a sense of wholeness or a connection to a higher purpose. And going back to that, it said health in the good state of body, roughly paraphrasing in Bonsarot, the 30th chapter. Health is synonymous with whole, and whole is also synonymous in Hebrew with shalom, a body that's at peace. It says often helping to quiet the mind and foster a sense of wholeness or connection to a higher purpose. Skipping down, it says incorporating stretching into a daily routine, often in combination with deep breathing, can turn a physical act into a restorative spiritual practice. So being mindful of what we eat, working out, they have small benefits. All right. And then also stretching, because we talked about that weight distribution. When you look at your spine, if you got too much tension on one side, i.e., if you got tension in your right hip, where you're gonna start to have, lower back problems. If you got tension in your right shoulder, well, it'll start pulling your neck on one side. So stretching is also important. Yeah, that was pretty much all I had. Did bros have anything else?
I just wanted to add to your point, like you mentioned, stretching, because a lot of Jake suffers from hypertension, and really, a lot of that comes from the diet, but also, from, physical stress and, different types of stresses, but really the best thing that ever happened to us was us coming back to this truth, because this allowed us opened up a lot of avenues for us to really start tapping back into the ancient ways and really start taking care of our bodies and being more conscious of what we intake and what we do on a daily basis, to give us that sound body and sound mind. Because Jake in the world, man, like you see, they don't, like a lot of Jakes that's pretty much through, like they don't stretch, they don't work out, they don't eat right, they eat nothing but McDonald's, like 3, 4, 5 times a week. Goddamn, eating pork, crab, shrimp, or lobster. Like these, I mean, these Jakes, man, they're like infested with parasites to the point where like they're pretty much controlled by these things. And I'm always wondering, like, yo, how do these people operate on a daily basis? Like, I'm over here trying to mind what I eat, you know what I'm saying? Try to maintain my body to the best that I can, you know, and I'm dealing with, work schedule and shit like that, and I feel like I'm through. How much more of these people, man?
Right.
But the fact that like we got the truth, like it just like the scriptures talk about, though the outward man perish, the inward man is renewed day by day. So, hey, all I gotta say is, man, call lawyer, how about Shimmy? I'll try for this truth, man, because otherwise we'll be through, man.
Con.
Okay.
Con, bros, had anything else?
Wow.
Con, hey, I don't want to Zaza Banaya Paulos, with us a beautiful edification through the spirit. Well, I don't want to Zaza Atam Yashia Wam Tawab, as well. You'll have a good day. Well, we can go ahead and close it out by saying, Call Halayim La, Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Rocha, Wadashwa, double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone that taught his truth and rule well. And much respect to you, bros, out there pushing his truth with our righteousness and sincerity. Shalom, shalom.
Shalom.